Coming up this week, we take a look at the dramatic situation Norwegian Cruise Line passengers found themselves in Hawaii. We also look at Norwegian's big plans for their private island. We look at Royal Caribbean's celebrations of their 100th million passenger. Meanwhile, the Celebrity Beyond looks like it's having continuing technical problems, and there are also a number of potential itinerary changes to be aware of due to various security reasons and political unrest at some locations around the world. It's August 3rd of 2025. Welcome to this week's cruise news brought to you by the Solo Muster Drill. So looking first at Norwegian Cruise Line, and again they appear to be making changes to an itinerary pretty late in the day, which is past the final payment date, so it's upsetting a lot of passengers who were booked and who now have little option but to proceed with the cruise or cancel and lose a significant proportion of their cruise fare. Passengers booked on the NCL getaway from Miami for an October 29th sailing of this year have been advised that instead of their planned itinerary, which would have taken them to predominantly stops in the Bahamas, including Nassau, Bimini and Norwegian's private island, Great Stirrup Cay, they will now instead be going to Cozumel, Mexico and having an extra sea day. They will still have their stop at Great Stirrup Cay. NCL have cited port availability as the reason for this quite significant itinerary change, and this has mystified many passengers given that cruise ship schedules for each of the ports appear to indicate that there is plenty of opportunity to actually dock there in both Nassau and Bimini. Unfortunately, this seems to be a fairly frequent method of operation by Norwegian, where they're arbitrarily choosing to make significant changes to an itinerary after final payment date has passed for the majority of passengers. Norwegian Cruise Line has also been very much in the cruise news this week due to a dramatic situation involving guests on their Pride of America ship, which was on its usual 7-day itinerary around the Hawaiian Islands this week, following the massive earthquake in Russia on Tuesday, which resulted in tsunami warnings across the entire Pacific, stretching as far as Alaska and Hawaii. In particular, those in Hawaii were advised to evacuate to high ground, or for those who were on land in high-rise buildings to get above at least the 4th floor. In addition, ports were closed and ships were ordered out to sea to wait it out. This coincided with guests from the Pride of America being on shore excursions on the Big Island. That included shore excursions organised through the cruise line and also people exploring independently. Unfortunately, up to 600 guests didn't make it back to the ship by the time that it was forced to depart. The guests on the shore excursions were taken to evacuation centres on higher ground at a safe distance from the tsunami evacuation zones, and they were accommodated overnight. While guests were undoubtedly concerned about the situation they found themselves in and quite annoyed at the cruise line, there really was no other alternative once the port had been closed and the ship was ordered to leave. Once the port reopened on Wednesday, the ship returned to pick up the guests. In addition to those dramatic situations, Norwegian Cruise Line also had other big news this week when they shared on Tuesday the announcement of their plans for enhanced facilities on their private island, Great Stirrup Cay in the Bahamas. So just in time for summer 2026, a new waterpark facility will be developed. It'll be over almost 6 acres of the island, will be called Great Tides Water Park, and will have an abundance of facilities including 19 water slides, an almost 800-foot long dynamic river and a new jet karts water track. Moving on now to Royal Caribbean, and to those who have been on any Royal Caribbean ship in recent times, it won't come as much of a surprise to learn that in their quarterly earnings call this past week, they were pleased to announce that their occupancy rate across all ships in the fleet, including their newest megaships to their smallest older ships, have all for the last quarter averaged an occupancy of 110%. So for anybody who may be confused about how a ship can achieve over 100% occupancy, this is due to the fact that occupancy is typically calculated on the basis of 2 people occupying a cabin, and obviously with additional extra guests such as children sharing cabins, this accounts for additional per cabin occupancy rates. Unfortunately, for anybody hoping for cheaper cruise fares, Royal Caribbean's strategy of late has been to pretty consistently increase their prices and no longer has any last-minute bargains. With occupancy levels like this and continuing high demand, none of this is a good sign for solo cruisers in particular hoping to experience Royal Caribbean, as it's become increasingly apparent over the past couple of years that their solo rates are becoming very expensive, even on ships that offer a limited number of solo cabins. And as well as their quarterly earnings call, Royal Caribbean also had another reason to celebrate this week. After 50 years in the cruise industry, the line reached a major milestone where they celebrated their 100 millionth guests. And the unsuspecting guests were on the Icon of the Seas. They were a family from Parkland in Florida who were surprised with the news when they boarded. They were treated like royalty for the cruise and were provided with various benefits and perks, including dining and drinks packages, a $1,000 onboard credit, and also a future cruise on Utopia of the Seas. Returning now to pick up on a story from last week regarding the Celebrity Beyond, and last week there was news of the technical problems being experienced by the ship resulting in the cancellation of a 7-day sailing on July 20th. The ship underwent repairs in Freeport in the Bahamas, and it returned to sailing its regular itinerary departing from Miami last Sunday, July 27. Unfortunately, it would seem, however, that the problems have not been fully resolved. Passengers on upcoming cruises between now and October have been receiving correspondence this week indicating that due to reduced sailing speeds there may be changes to some of their itineraries. So this is all quite surprising for a very, very new ship. In cruise news from Europe this week, the Port Authority in Catania in Sicily announced that work is being completed on a third pier, and that will now be able to accommodate the largest cruise ships currently sailing, including megaships. In addition, the Port Authority has also announced that work is ongoing on a new cruise terminal, and that's expected to be ready early in 2026. This is thought to give new options for potential home ports in the Mediterranean, particularly given that certain cruise ports, Barcelona for example, have increasingly been clamping down on the number of cruise ships and cruise passengers arriving and departing from those locations. And finally, to look at a number of announcements this past week that are related to security issues in various parts of the world, which may result in changes or cancellations of cruise itineraries. One of the most significant is in the Middle East, where Costa Cruises announced this week that they're cancelling their planned itineraries in the region. The Costa Toscana was scheduled to operate sailings from Dubai between October 2025 and March of 2026. The Costa Toscana is one of Costa Cruise Line's largest and newest ships, and it has been announced that it will now remain in Europe, doing Southern European and Northern Africa itineraries for the season. The revised itineraries are currently in preparation and are due to soon become available for bookings on Costa's website. Royal Caribbean also had a security-related announcement this week. They had previously suspended their stops on their private island in Labadee in Haiti due to security concerns. Haiti has been under a state of emergency since March 2024, and it's currently the subject of a Level 4 advisory from the US State Department, which essentially means do not travel. The advisory is due to the widespread crime, including kidnappings and carjackings, as well as significant gang violence and frequent crimes involving firearms. In light of the security situation in nearby Port-au-Prince, Royal Caribbean has now confirmed that suspensions of visits to Labadee will continue through to October. In their statement to passengers, they have advised that the decision has been taken out of an abundance of caution. This impacts 23 planned itineraries on 5 different ships, so that involves the Adventure of the Seas, Radiance of the Seas, Freedom of the Seas, Icon of the Seas, and Oasis of the Seas. If you're booked on any of those, probably watch out for emails alerting you to changed itineraries between now and October. A further area in the Caribbean also of concern from a security point of view are the islands of Trinidad and Tobago. Earlier in July, authorities in Trinidad and Tobago declared a nationwide state of emergency. Several governments have since issued updated travel advisories to reflect this. Several cruise lines are scheduled to have ports of call on one or other of the islands later this year, and while cruise lines have not immediately announced any changes to their planned itineraries, it is something to keep an eye on if you are actually on a sailing which is scheduled to have one of those ports of call. That wraps up the cruise news roundup for the past week. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, if you found this to be helpful, or if you'd like to stay updated on any future cruise news or any of my travel vlogs, please consider subscribing to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated. Bye for now and have a good week.